When I first came to Sudbury Valley, my understanding was that my life as a kid, which was running around and doing what I wanted, was going to continue at SVS. Instead of going to a school where I would be sitting down and learning things in a set order, with my time all divided up. To me, the whole idea of sitting down was just anathema. I was not into sitting down. I was a runaround kid. I was outside through most of my early school career, even in the winter, and I couldn't understand how the whole idea of being penned up related to being a kid at all. When you're a little kid, adults seem really tired and slow, and there's this big feeling that that's going to happen to you one day. So you'd better play and have fun while you have all this energy.
When I first started, I remember seeing students draped all over the place. What an interesting crew. I saw people sitting with sketchbooks. I saw people kicking back and reading for the joy of reading. I saw a kid playing guitar, and I was right over there in a second, listening, really interested. The school was more than I could have hoped for. What an explosion of things going on. You could smell the fresh food being baked in the kitchen, and you could hear music being played upstairs, and you could go through rooms full of books and more books, and the pond, and just the way people were dressed and the way they looked. People were just letting it loose, not afraid to sit outside and read a book, or play a guitar, or be interested in something.
We had our own world. We were solid in our own world. It was a world of children. We were so busy. At Sudbury Valley, there were always older kids who had done things that the younger group was trying to get to. You automatically wanted to be one of the people who could do it too, so you kept trying until you could do it. Everything was always, you have to get one step further. I don't know why. Something naturally makes you want to try, like tobogganing. Instead of tobogganing down this hill, you would toboggan down the hard hill, or you would go over the toboggan jump, or up at the rocks, you would jump across a wider ravine between two rocks. It was never stagnant. Everything was a challenge.
The older kids weren't snobby or superior. I respected them because they were so much more experienced and they knew so many things that I didn't know. There were certain times when they'd interact with us and play, and then there were times when they'd be doing their own thing and we'd be doing ours. Sort of like different worlds that would come together for a reason and then go back to their own business.
For the most part, I did stuff in big blocks of time. I would start each day by continuing what I left off on the day before. So if I was building a tree fort somewhere, I would start again on that tree fort. I would work on the tree fort until I got hungry enough to come in for lunch, or, if I was smart enough, I would have brought the lunch to the tree fort in the first place. Once the tree fort was done, it was no longer as interesting. Building something is more fun than once you have it, because the fun was in building it.
When I was really little, I would come in, see what my friends were doing, and catch up on what happened overnight. There would be a mass of little kids in the playroom, and I was one of them. Or we would be roaming around the school doing something. We would play games or read books. We would do puzzles, or we would run around outside or sit and chat. I don't know what we talked about. There are so many typical days, so many different things. Sometimes we'd cook all day, or go off to a museum. Other days we'd spend in the art room.
The basic rules were, don't disturb anyone, don't hit anyone, don't bother what they're doing, and don't make noise in the reading rooms. I remember being conscious of an excitement about living life without cumbersome rules. The basics were like the 10 Commandments, rules that made sense to everybody in every age group, and everything else was a sense of complete freedom and inclusion. You were in on all this stuff. You were not watching it, you were part of it.
The games we played went in cycles. Fads would spring up. Someone would bring a cribbage board to school and would teach a few kids how to play cribbage. Before you knew it, everybody was playing cribbage. It would get very intense for maybe a month. Then people would just naturally burn out on it and move on to the next thing. It was competitive, I think, in a healthy sense, but it was more that there was an intensity about it. Cribbage was a new and exciting thing that you wanted to completely master. You would just be trying to play your best hand of cribbage. I think about these games on a lot of levels. Cards were to a certain extent the same as sports. It was a social thing to do, and there was a definite effort at fairness. We were all trying to have fun together, so without really being conscious of it, we taught ourselves how to live with each other. We had to make our own rules, and we had to be fair or no one else would be in the group, since everyone was in the group voluntarily. How to work with people was really the important thing that was going on educationally. It's not as if you're trying to teach yourself skills. You're doing something for your own fun, and then it happens. Suddenly you realize you're someone who knows how to deal with people.
I practiced music at school. There were days when I would practice a lot more, and days when I would practice a lot less. I would have a vision of wanting to be able to play certain pieces, and then I'd get to the point where I could play those pieces, and I'd want to be able to play other pieces that were harder. I didn't think about what it would do for me. I just thought it was something I wanted to do. I believe that everything you do helps everything else you do, because if you're doing one hard thing, it's not that different from doing another hard thing. It may take different physical skills or maybe different mental habits, but it takes the same kind of concentration and requires the same kind of thinking.
I played a lot of music. I guess this is a thing that is typical of the school and the totally random way it occurred. Music was coming into my head. I was not seeking it out. I would just be walking along and I'd be humming a tune, and I'd start thinking about my life as a teenager, and words would be there. It's an incredibly expressive time in your life. You're falling in love for the first time. You're about to become an adult, but you're not quite one yet. You wish the world was a perfect place, and you're realizing all the ways it's messed up. Lots of very powerful emotions. My friend Alan, who played classical piano, happened to say one day, completely casually, so casually that he doesn't even remember saying it to me, even though it changed my life, "Why don't you just try picking out some of those tunes on the piano?" I couldn't believe how easy it was. Suddenly I was playing 4-fingered piano. 3 fingers on the right, 1 finger on the left. I was writing a lot of songs and playing whenever I had the chance, and that kept building as an interest.
I used to spend a lot of time alone. I'd go over to the bridge and behind the little gate behind the mill house and sit next to the water and listen to the water going over the dam and read a book. That was my way of tuning out. It was just wonderful to have the freedom to decide, now I want to read a book and I'm going to go down there and do it, and to be able to do it.
Everyone was extraordinarily mobile. Trying to find a kid at school is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. They'd be there one minute and gone the next. Mobility was a big part of what was different about the school. Mobility and randomness together let you find the things you're interested in. You're not stuck anywhere. If you're bored, you zip somewhere else and find something else you're interested in, so that the whole day you're doing stuff you're excited about. There's a lot of stuff going on. Other kids are doing things. There are books and activities and people, so you're not just creating the world out of a whole cloth yourself. Part of it is stuff you're creating, and part of it is just stuff you're walking into. Part of the fun of school was spending whole chunks of the day walking from room to room, seeing what was going on in each room before finally settling down and deciding to do something in a particular place.
Everybody ran the school. When you got down to the nuts and bolts of voting on allocating funds, the school meeting gave everyone a chance to discuss what they felt should be their priorities. Then the majority decided. It gave children an opportunity to be responsible, but it did not force responsibility on them if they didn't want it, because they didn't have to be there and they didn't have to vote. There were a lot of people who did not show up or left during the middle of the meeting, when discussions started about how much money we are going to need to replace the drains. They didn't want to take responsibility for that. That's fine. There's no reason for them to have to take that responsibility, just as there's no obligation on the part of the people in this country to vote. But the point is, everybody had the right and the opportunity. That's democracy in action.
The responsibility of living in a democracy is the best thing you can ever do for kids, because someday they're going to be adults. If you make every decision for a kid until he's 18, and then send him out there in the world and say, okay, now you do it, that's culture shock. So it's best to learn how to make those decisions that are going to affect your life from an early age, because sooner or later, you're going to make those decisions, and they'll be much more important ones. We have to let everybody have their say if we're going to be this kind of country.
Being on the Judicial Committee was really just a month-long glimpse into people's lives. You'd have heart-to-heart talks with kids, because what are you going to do about a kid who's always bugging somebody? The Judicial Committee was your tool for making people understand that it's not that running down the hall is the crime of the century, but let's say I'm walking down the hall with a tray full of fragile things and you run into me. That's not something I really want to encounter. Learn to live your life in the context of not making your freedom impinge on the freedom of somebody else. I went from being a self-centered person to realizing the effect of my activities on a larger scope, and I would make adjustments to my behavior.
The judicial system took care of the problems when common sense amongst the staff and students themselves didn't. But the feedback you got from everybody was more important than the judicial system. I think people respond much better to somebody saying, look, this is not good, or just by someone being a role model, showing you how to interact and what's okay and what's not. When someone crossed the line too many times or flagrantly, then the judicial system came into play. There was peer pressure to act responsibly, and that was a big word at Sudbury Valley, responsibility. I was 9 years old, and I was being trusted with things that I never thought I'd be trusted with. So the pressure I felt came more from within me than from the judicial system.
A lot of people hate their childhood, or hate their school, and they really start being themselves when they become adults. I was able to enjoy a period of my life when most others are waiting for their lives to begin.
Most of the things I learned from other kids. I'm not saying I didn't learn from the classes I took, but the bulk of what you learn at Sudbury Valley is life. You learn how to deal with people and how to get things done and how to organize all the things you learn. Some of it you learn from seeing adults do it or participating with adults. I was part of committees and things like that where there would be other people showing me, but most of what you learn from the other kids. How you live and how things happen and what goes on. Because you're sitting around talking or somebody is saying something and an idea comes up and it sort of gets put through the mill and evolves.
The school let my own interests rise to the surface. When you sit down to paint, you don't just sit and paint. You have to think about what you're doing and why. Any creative effort, perhaps any effort at all, requires a great deal of thought, even reading a book. You don't just read a book, You think about what you read. Otherwise, you're doing it for nothing. The school gave us the gift of time to relax, to have those things come to the surface that were there. It gave us time for reflection, for the introspection that you need to really develop your own creativity.
Suddenly the freedom was too much for me. I wanted structure. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. One day I approached Dan Greenberg and asked him if we could talk. I must have looked like a nervous wreck. What should I be doing to prepare for college? Should I go to college? What am I supposed to be doing here? I unleashed a barrage of questions. Danny smiled, thought for a second, and then he said, "Keith, you can do anything you want to do." Anything you want to do? I said to myself as a sinking feeling in my stomach hit me. I was looking for guidance, a deep personal insight, a sign, anything. And he hits me with, "Do anything you want to do?" I smiled and said something like, "Oh, yeah, right." He assured me that college would always be there for me and that I was already a wonderful human being. I felt better when I left there, but something still wasn't resolved. There had to be something more. So I went back to my books and classes and tried not to think of college in the future for a while. Maybe I'd just wake up one morning and know what I wanted to do. Then something strange started to happen. I started showing up at classes with no homework. More and more I would spend hours playing the piano, or working in the darkroom, or hanging out with newfound friends. Then I stopped going to classes, some of my classes altogether. What would my friends and teachers back in high school have thought? What a shame, a veritable deadbeat. Somehow, though, it was okay. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was really being me. Could this have been what Danny was talking about? I mean, doing what I want to do right now? Could it be this simple? I'd begun to trust myself, to look within me for the answers, and it felt good.
What I did here at SVS, when I was here for those 5 years, it turned out to be mostly music, I guess, as it applies to what I do now. I mean, that's the thing that I did then that I most do now. I played the piano a lot here, just improvising on my own. And let's see, what happened. Once I decided I wanted to learn more about music, I tried to find from the people here who knew about music what else I should learn, what else they would be able to teach me. And I kind of exhausted that within about a year. So continued working on my own, and Joan Rubin actually helped me get accepted to Berklee College of Music, and it seemed like the next best step. And as it turned out, I was ready to go there because since I'd been just playing around on my own and listening to records and figuring things out, I pretty much knew everything that they were trying to teach me at college. I just didn't know the names for it. So it was kind of easy just to hook it all up, you know. And okay, this thing, I know that. Now I know what to call it, so when I talk to other people, I could tell them, you know, and they could tell me what to play, etc. And then I found out also when I went to Los Angeles and went to LACC, they had a classical approach to the theory and the techniques and everything. And it turned out that was all the same too, but they had a different set of names. So I learned that. And then I realized, well, gee, all this stuff is there's a pattern going on here. It's, and I found basically in composition, when you're composing music, you come up with a set of rules, either subconsciously or consciously, and by following them, you get a particular sound. And that's really all there is to it, you know. And people who teach music theory, it's like they go back and they analyze the older composers and they try to come up with the rules that they must have been using, and then they teach it to the students. And the students, by process of elimination, it's like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Ah, you've got it. They sound like the old composer. And so that's kind of a backwards way to do it to me. It's like, you should tell somebody, well, look, these composers were playing this neat kind of game. Why don't you come up with a game and see what it sounds like, you know?
I want to say something about how the school fits into this, because superficially these look like very different things. I went from an unstructured environment where I was doing things that had no obvious academic content to a very structured environment, at least when I was an undergraduate. And the point I want to make is that the differences, some of the differences are actually very superficial. One of the things about being at Sudbury Valley is that you never really have to do anything. But there are always so many things competing for your attention and so much going on that you sort of never feel like you've got time to do all the things that you want to do anyway. And this is, you know, surely a condition that a lot of people recognize as being kind of a common one in life. But it's the same kind of thing that happens if you go to college, if you're actually interested in what's going on. You know, there's lots of stuff going on. There are lots of things you want to do. There's no way that you have time to do them all. So you just sort of have to make decisions all the time about what's important to do and what isn't important to do. You know, whether it's more important to spend all day working with plasticine, or whether it's more important to go out cross-country skiing, or whether it's more important to play the piano, or whether it's more important to do mathematics, or whatever the thing is. I mean, the thing that you learn at Sudbury Valley, because you're deciding what to do all the time, or the thing that one of the things I felt I learned anyway was sort of to decide what was important to me at any given time, and to put my energy into doing that.
And one of the things that happened to me at the school was all of a sudden there was just no problems. And it was very confusing. I didn't have anybody to fight with. I could just do whatever I wanted. And it was like this big emptiness around me. There was no school to skip. There was no disciplinarian to see. There was nobody calling me down to the office every morning. And it took a while for me to sort of get comfortable with that, but I did. And I guess the thing that the school did for me in a way was to kind of make me realize at that point that the problems weren't all outside, that some of it was my own life, and I had to figure out how to work that out. And I guess the wonderful thing for the school for me was that I had time to do that. I had plenty of time to just hang out and talk and do whatever it was I felt like doing, very little of it academic. I took some classes. Most of the time, though, I talked to people, played cards. I got to be a very good card player. I played bridge, bid whist. I'm a very good poker player. I go to Reno on a regular basis, and I never lose money.
Lots of times I talk to people at the school, and they sort of say, I can't see the person who asked the question. Oh, there you are. They sort of say, you know, well, didn't your parents worry about doing this? Didn't they worry about like taking this big chance by sending you to this really weird place and what was going to happen? And I try to sort of turn it on its head. I say, well, it seems to me that the people who should be worried are the people who are sending their kids to a traditional school. It's not that you can be sure that if you send your kid to a traditional school, something terrible will happen, but you're taking a big risk. Because what you're doing is you're taking this kid and you're saying, okay, from now on, you don't get to decide things, other people decide things for you. And maybe after 12 years of that, your kid comes out all right. But it's a big chance to take. Sudbury Valley, I think, is no risk at all.
I don't think it's quite so black and white.
I don't think it's black and white that if you go to a traditional school, that something disastrous will always happen to you. That's not the point I'm saying. But I do think, to me, it seems very black and white that traditional school is the risky scenario where things can come out in many unfortunate ways, and that Sudbury Valley is sort of a relatively healthy and safe scenario. That's the sense in which I see it as black and white.
I think the reason people turn out is basically, there are a lot of factors, but it's because of themselves. And SVS doesn't really shape people, you know, and other schools may try to shape people. I think what this school does is it allows you to get your own shape. Learned a lot from my friends, and my friends went above me and below me in ages. I think there was a lot wider range. I do remember this being different. When I was in public school, my friends were all within a year of me. And here, they were within, I don't know, really everybody in school. And that did include the staff members, too. The staff members they're people, you know. The staff members I don't know, they're real personalities, you know. And I know them, and they're like, instead of saying, okay, this is a staff member, what do I think about them? It's like more like, this is this person, you know. What do they have? Mm-hmm. So I guess your question is it good to bounce off them? I would say yeah, and they are available. But I would also answer that my choice was not always to be around them. I think it's really important to have fun when you're learning. It makes it a lot easier and quicker, and you retain things. And its pertinence is something that you're going to be doing later if your life is lived correctly. You're going to be doing something that you like to do. You know, I mean, if you wanted to teach somebody something to do something that you wanted them to do, I don't think freedom and having fun is a good idea. I think you want to repeat incessantly the order. And then that's the only thing they're going to know, and they're going to do it. But in a society of individuals, diverse society of individuals, the strength is everybody doing a particular niche. And the niche that the person's going to be good at is the one that they like the best. So you might as well learn what you like doing. You just go right there to your niche.